I sold my house on a Tuesday in October. I remember because the leaves on the maple tree in my front yard had just turned that deep red I always loved, and I stood on the porch after the closing and thought, well, this is the last time I'll see that tree in the fall. 31 years I'd lived in that house, raised 2 kids there, buried a husband from there. And now I was handing the keys to a young couple who couldn't stop smiling at each other, and I was telling myself this was the right thing to do. My son had asked me to move in 8 months earlier. He and his wife, they have 2 boys, 7 and 4, were stretched thin. That was the word he used. Stretched thin. His wife had gone back to work after the second baby, and daycare costs were eating them alive. $3,000 a month for 2 kids. I understood. I really did. I'd done the math myself before he even finished asking. Mom, it would just make everything easier, he said. The boys love you, you'd have your own space. And honestly, we worry about you out there alone. That last part is what got me, not the practical reasons, the worry. I was 63 years old, healthy, still driving, still gardening, still meeting my friend Doris every Thursday for coffee. I wasn't alone in any way that frightened me. But when your child says he worries about you, something shifts. You want to be the mother who makes things easier, not harder. So I said yes. I sold the house and put $90,000 into a joint account to help them buy a bigger place, something with enough room for all of us. We found a 4-bedroom in a suburb about 40 minutes from where I'd been living. My son handled the mortgage. I contributed the down payment. We didn't drop any paperwork because we were family, and family doesn't need contracts. I know. My room was on the 2nd floor, across from the boys' rooms. It was a good size, with a window that looked out onto the backyard, and I'd brought my own furniture, my own quilt, the lamp from my bedroom that I'd had since my 30s. It felt like mine. For about 6 weeks, it felt like mine. The first change was small. My daughter-in-law said she wanted to use my room for a home office because the desk fit better in there and the light was good for video calls. Could I maybe take the room at the end of the hall instead? It was slightly smaller, but they put a fresh coat of paint on it. I said sure. It was just a room. The second room was smaller than I'd realized. No closet. Just a rod bolted to the wall behind a curtain. The window faced the neighbor's fence. I put my quilt on the bed and told myself it was fine. By the 2nd month, I had a routine. I got up at 6, made coffee, got the boys dressed and fed before their parents came downstairs. I drove the older one to school. I kept the younger one during the day. I started dinner around 4 so it'd be ready by the time they got home. After dinner, I cleaned up while my son and his wife watched television or went on their phones. I want to be honest about something. I didn't mind most of it. I love my grandsons. The younger one especially had this habit of pressing his forehead against my cheek when he was tired, just leaning into me like I was a wall he trusted completely. You can't put a price on that. I knew it. I felt it. But I also felt my back. I'd had 2 surgeries in my 50s, a herniated disc and then a follow-up procedure that left me with what my doctor called managed chronic pain. Most days it was background noise. But lifting a 4-year-old repeatedly, bending to load the dishwasher, sitting on the floor doing puzzles, it added up. By evening, I was moving slower. By the 3rd month, I was taking ibuprofen every night before bed. I asked if we could look into a part-time preschool for the younger one, just 3 mornings a week. It would give my back a break, give him some socialization, and free up my mornings for the small things that were falling through the cracks, like my own doctor's appointments, like calling my friend Doris back. My daughter-in-law said preschool for a 4-year-old was expensive and they'd rather wait until kindergarten. I said I understood. I didn't push. What I did instead was ask if, on the days my daughter-in-law worked from home, she could take over watching him for a few hours so I could rest. She worked from home on Wednesdays and Fridays. She said she couldn't be interrupted during work hours. Her job required focus. I said I understood that too. I started finding small pockets of time when both boys were occupied, one at school, one napping, to sit with a heating pad on my lower back and just breathe. That was my rest. 20 minutes here and there, tucked between tasks like stolen change. My son noticed I was moving slower. He asked once in passing if I was feeling okay. I told him my back was bothering me. He nodded and said, "We should probably get you a better mattress." They didn't get me a better mattress. The thing I didn't expect was the invisible line. There was a room in the back of the house, a sunroom really, with big windows and comfortable chairs, that had been described to me when we were looking at the house together as a space we'd all share. A reading room, we called it. I imagined sitting there in the mornings with my coffee before the house woke up. Within a few months, it became my daughter-in-law's yoga room. The comfortable chairs were moved to the garage. There was a sign on the door, not a real sign, just a sticky note that said, "Do not disturb 6-8 a.m. Those were the exact hours I'd been getting up. I started taking my coffee to my room. I don't want to make my daughter-in-law sound like a villain, because the truth is more uncomfortable than that. She wasn't cruel. She was just someone who had decided, without ever saying it out loud, that I was a resource rather than a person. And my son, I love my son, had quietly accepted that framework because it kept his household running smoothly. The clearest moment I can point to is a Sunday in January. My back had been bad for 3 days. I mean, really bad. The kind where sitting down requires a plan and standing back up requires a different one. I told my son on Saturday that I needed to take it easy for a few days and asked if they could handle the boys that weekend. He said of course. Sunday morning I came downstairs late, almost 8 o'clock, which was late for me, and found my daughter-in-law in the kitchen already dressed, keys in her hand, gym bag over her shoulder. "I've got my class at 8:30, she said. "Can you take the boys?" I told her my back was still bad. I said I'd mentioned it to my son. I said I just needed one more day. She put her keys down on the counter. She didn't raise her voice. She looked at me in a way that was almost patient, the way you look at someone when you're waiting for them to stop being an inconvenience. "So, what exactly are you contributing here?" she said. "Because the way I see it, we're carrying you." I didn't say anything. She picked up her keys and left. I stood in that kitchen for a long time. The boys were upstairs. I could hear them arguing over something. A toy, probably. The coffee maker was beeping. The sun was coming through the window over the sink and hitting the tile in that particular winter morning way, flat and bright and indifferent. The way I see it, we're carrying you. I had put $90,000 into this house. I had spent 8 months cooking, cleaning, driving, lifting, scheduling, worrying, and loving those boys with everything I had. I had given up my home, my maple tree, my Thursday mornings with Doris, my 20 minutes alone with a heating pad, and I had done all of it quietly, without complaint, because I wanted to be useful, because I wanted my son to stop worrying about me, because I believed that love and effort were the same thing, and I was being carried. I went upstairs and sat on my bed and looked at the curtain hanging from the rod on the wall. I called Doris. She didn't say "I told you so," even though she had, gently, about a year ago. She just listened. And then she said, "Where do you want to go?" I hadn't let myself think that far, but I knew the answer immediately, the way you know something you've been refusing to look at directly. "Somewhere that's mine," I said. Doris had a spare bedroom. She'd been renting it to a college student who'd graduated in May and hadn't yet found a replacement tenant. She said I could stay there while I looked for my own place. She said she'd come get me whenever I was ready. I told her to come Thursday. I spent the next 3 days being careful, not distant. I didn't want the boys to feel anything shift. I read to the younger one every afternoon like always. I drove the older one to school and asked about his friends and laughed at the knock-knock joke he'd been working on for 2 weeks. I made dinners. I loaded the dishwasher, but in the evenings after they were asleep, I packed. I packed slowly and thoughtfully. I packed only what was actually mine. My clothes, my books, my lap. I left the kitchen things I'd brought because they were already absorbed into the household and fighting over them would have made the leaving ugly. I packed my documents, my Social Security card, my Medicare card, the folder with the financial records from the house sale, which I realized I should have been keeping somewhere safer all along. My son was traveling for work Wednesday night and wouldn't be back until Friday. I had not planned it that way, but when it turned out that way, I decided not to rearrange my plans around his schedule. Thursday morning, Doris pulled into the driveway at 9. My daughter-in-law was upstairs on a video call. The younger one was in the living room watching cartoons. I kissed him on the top of his head. I told him Grandma was going to visit her friend for a while and that I'd call him that night. He looked up at me and said, "Okay, Grandma," and turned back to the television the way 4-year-olds do, completely trusting that the adults around them are handling things. I carried my bags to the car. I didn't leave a note. I know some people would have. I didn't think a note was going to say anything that needed to be said with paper and a pen. What needed to be said could be said face to face when my son got home. When I was already settled somewhere else and no longer dependent on anyone's good graces to have a roof over my head. My son called me Friday evening. He wasn't angry exactly. He was flustered. He kept saying he didn't understand, that I should have talked to him, that he'd had no idea things had gotten to this point. I said quietly that I had tried to tell him about my back multiple times, that I'd asked for help multiple times, that he'd been in the house for most of it and seen what my days looked like. He got quieter as I talked. He asked about his wife's words, whether I was upset about what she'd said. I told him I wasn't upset. I told him it was clarifying. There was a pause. "I'm sorry, Mom," he said. I believed him. I do believe him. But I also know that sorry doesn't restore what I sold, or give me back the mornings I sat alone in a room with a curtain instead of a closet, feeling like a guest in a house I helped buy. Sorry is a beginning, not a resolution. I stayed at Doris's for 6 weeks. In that time, I found a senior living apartment about 12 minutes from my son's house. Not a nursing home, not assisted living, just a quiet building for people over 55. With a small balcony and a community garden and a neighbor named Harriet who had lived there for 9 years and promised me I'd have more social life than I could handle by March. Harriet was right. I've been here 8 months now. My grandsons visit on Sundays. My son brings them after their soccer games and they come inside and eat whatever I've baked. And the younger one always finds my lap before he finds a chair. I took a watercolor class in the building rec room and I'm not good at it yet, but I show up every Tuesday anyway. I have coffee with Doris on Thursdays again. I sleep in a real bed with a proper mattress that I chose and paid for myself. My back still hurts some days, but some days it doesn't. I've thought a lot about what I would tell another woman in the position I was in. Someone about to sell everything and move in with her child because she wants to help, because she loves her grandchildren, because her son says he worries about her. I don't have a clean lesson. Life doesn't work that way, but I'll say this. When someone tells you that your contribution isn't enough, that you're a burden, that they're carrying you, after months of cooking and driving and caring and aching, pay attention to what they've just told you about how they see you, not in that moment, not just in the heat of something, in general, in the quiet, ordinary math of how they add you up. You are not a line item. You are not a solution to a childcare problem. You do not owe anyone the remainder of your good years as payment for being loved. I didn't know that as clearly at 63 as I know it now. The maple tree is probably red again this month. Someone else's kids are jumping in the leaves underneath it. And I'm sitting on my balcony with a cup of coffee, watching the sun come up over a parking lot that I have absolutely no complaints about, and thinking, for the first time in a long time, that I am right where I belong. If any of this sounds like your life right now, I want you to know something. You're not invisible. You're not invisible. And this is not as permanent as it feels. There is a Doris somewhere. There is a balcony somewhere. And you are allowed to go find it. I've been sitting with this story for a while now, turning it over the way you turn over a stone to see what's underneath. And what I keep coming back to isn't the anger. I'm past the anger. It's the pattern. How clearly I can see it now, and how invisible it was to me while I was living inside it. I made choices. That's the part I had to sit with longest. I chose to sell my house. I chose to contribute that money without a single piece of paper to protect myself. I chose to stay quiet when my room was swapped, when the sunroom disappeared, when my days filled up with tasks nobody asked me about. Each choice felt at the time like love, like flexibility, like being the kind of mother and grandmother who doesn't make things difficult. But there's a difference between generosity and disappearing, and I had confused the two for a long time. What I know now, and I mean really know, not just as a phrase you nod at, is that how you let people treat you in the small moments teaches them how to treat you in the large ones. When I moved my own things into the smaller room without a word, I taught them something. When I stopped going to the sunroom and started taking my coffee upstairs alone, I taught them something. I taught them that I would absorb whatever was given to me and ask for nothing back, and they learned the lesson perfectly. That's not their failure alone, it's mine too. That's the hard part. The morning my daughter-in-law said what she said, I think part of me already knew I'd been moving toward that door for months. Not physically. I hadn't let myself think that far, but something in me had been quietly gathering itself. And when she said those words, it wasn't like a door slamming. It was more like a lock clicking open, like finally having a name for something that had been sitting in the room with us for a long time. I think about Doris, how she just said, "Where do you want to go?" Not, "Are you sure?" Not, "Have you talked to him?" She asked where I wanted to go, as if it were the most natural thing in the world for a 63-year-old woman to want something for herself. I had needed someone to ask me that question for months and hadn't known it. And I think about Harriet, who told me I'd have more social life than I could handle. She was right. Not because this building is some paradise. It's a parking lot with a garden and a decent community room. But because I came here as myself, not as a solution, not as a service, as a person with time and taste and preferences and a back that needs a good mattress. The life I have now is quieter than it sounds, but it took more courage to build than anything I've done in years. Not the loud kind of courage, not confrontation or ultimatums, the quiet kind. The kind that gets up before the sun and packs one bag at a time and drives away without a scene because you finally understand that you are worth the effort of leaving. If you're somewhere right now where someone has decided you're a line item, I want you to hear this. The way people see you is real information. Not a mood, not a bad week, information. And you are allowed to act on it.